We will begin with number 6 Kentucky at Arkansas. This one a 6 p.m. tip-off on Saturday. You can watch it on ESPN. Our friends over at Haslametrics have this as Kentucky a little bit more than an 8-point road favorite, over under at 169.7, so in between 169 and 170. Eli, if we look at your up-to-the-date top 25 rankings, your personal college basketball rankings over at thelines.com, you have Kentucky as the number 11 team in the country, so slightly lower than their AP poll ranking of number 6. And of course, you have Arkansas not ranked at the moment in your top 25. So what's your reaction again as we record here on Thursday ahead of posting this show on Friday? And of course, lines will come out late Friday night. So the nature of this is we don't know sportsbook odds at this juncture, but we can use our friends at Haslametrics to get an idea of where they post the number. Perhaps sportsbooks will be around that number. Often they are. So let's just operate with this Haslametric spread of Kentucky around an 8-point favorite. I say that. Your response is what?
Well, first, this is going to surprise people just because Arkansas has struggled, losing 5 of their last 6. All 5 of those losses coming by double digits. I make this line closer to Kentucky minus 6.5, minus 7. So I bake in the home spot. Now, there are some key injuries that I'll get to with the Hogs in a moment, but I'm not calling Kentucky's loss at South Carolina a blimp on the radar, meaning that Kentucky's gonna roll or at least not face a loss like that in the near future in SEC play in the foreseeable future. Just because you look back at how South Carolina beat them, and you start with on the defensive end for the Gamecocks. Kentucky showed the blueprint once again, first time really since non-conference play, of how to knock them off when they're on offense. So granted, tough road environment like we're going to see at Bud Walton Arena, but essentially how to beat Kentucky offensively in this new John Calipari spaced out floor spacing offense. You force them into half court, and easier said than done, but outside of Rob Dillingham, Kentucky really didn't get out in transition. You crowd shooters like Antonio Reeves, who struggled for much of the game from 3. You give up dribble penetration, but then you rotate over and contest at the rim. And Kentucky really didn't have a lot of answers. John Calipari throwing out a bunch of different lineups. I don't think the minutes continuity was there by any stretch. Maybe a lineup played together for 3 minutes, something like that. But outside of 1 or 2 lineups, Calipari was just kind of throwing darts at the board, it seemed like. And then if you go back to the North Carolina win in mid-December, and I go back to that day just because that's when Kentucky got Aaron Bradshaw, one of their heralded freshmen, and Onyenso, 6'11", 7-foot big, coming off the bench this season. Both of them made their season debuts in that game. And Kentucky, since that mid-December mark, ranks number 137 in adjusted defensive efficiency. They're really exploitable in their pick and roll coverage. They're allowing a top 70 3-point scoring rate across college basketball. And you look at some teams that have really struggled at the defensive end in the NCAA tournament. And I say this not really with a grain of salt, maybe a tad just because of how explosive Kentucky can be offensively and on a neutral court. It may not be the same deal as it was at South Carolina on Tuesday night, but most recently, Ohio State in 2021, they were upset by Max Asmus and Oral Roberts in the first round. They ranked 79th in adjusted defensive efficiency. In 2018, Arizona, 71st. Neither of those teams won a game in the dance. Wichita State in 2018, same deal. 2014 with Duke, I think that was the Grayson Allen-led Blue Devils. Zilch in the dance. So you get my point, Steven. Teams that can't defend, especially at that poor of a rate like Kentucky has defended since the middle mark of December, don't fare well in the NCAA tournament. And we'll get to the Arkansas side of things in a moment. But when I say that to you, are you a believer in Kentucky, especially at the defensive end of the court?
I think their offense has a ceiling any given night to help them survive that defense, but I agree with you, big picture. That is not the profile of a team I want to be backing to make a Final Four run. I completely agree with you on that. So when I look at their futures and I see 16-1 to win the national title, I cringe a little bit. And they have been a team that, if you're following college basketball Twitter, college basketball betting Twitter, that has been getting a lot of love for weeks now and since the start of the season. And I think there's a good reason why you picked Auburn instead of Kentucky in this conference to be the team with the high ceiling and make a deep run, because they are more well-rounded and better defensively than Kentucky. As of recently, if we look at Haslametrics, it's 5 straight games now where Kentucky really has not exceeded their defensive expectation by a wide margin. They've either slightly beaten that expectation in that game defensively or performed below expectation. 118th in defensive efficiency. The only metric they excel at on defense is preventing putbacks off of offensive rebounds, because they have 7-footers on the inside. So if you look at an SEC play in particular, in the SEC, they are 11th or worse in 3-point field goal percentage defense, 2-point field goal percentage defense, and takeaway percentage as well. They're not forcing turnovers. So, it made sense to me why they were on upset alert and eventually did get upset at South Carolina, because South Carolina has the defense to match up with Kentucky's offense. And with Kentucky's defense not playing very well on any given night, you can pull an upset. South Carolina is number 4 in the SEC in effective field goal percentage defense. As for Saturday, I'm not sure Arkansas's defense can do enough to slow Kentucky's offense, though, down in this game. This is 2 versus 12 in terms of 3-point field goal percentage among SEC teams, 4 versus 13 in terms of turnover percentage. Kentucky protecting the ball, Arkansas not able to create turnovers. 3 versus 10 in terms of Kentucky's offensive efficiency versus Arkansas's conference rank in defensive efficiency. So I think Arkansas sucks, man. Like, honestly, that's where I'm at on this. And I know Bud Walton Arena is a tough place to play, but we already saw Auburn go in there and beat the tail off of Arkansas too. So I'm not exactly running to the window to lay this many points in Kentucky on the road with their defensive issues, like you've pointed out. But I'm also not excited to back Arkansas at this point too. It's certainly a situation where I am going to be looking to fade Kentucky in other road environments, though, I think.
Yeah, and to your point with Arkansas, this isn't your typical Eric Musselman conjured up team that he got in the portal. Especially you look at the last couple of Arkansas teams, or maybe before last season, the previous 2 made it to the Elite 8-ish, I think, in the NCAA tournament. Last year's Sweet 16, despite under exceeding expectations in conference play. But a couple of injuries, like I mentioned. Trevon Brazile, one of the better bigs in the SEC, dealing with soreness in the knee that he had surgically repaired a year ago, torn ACL last December. So who knows if he's going to play. And then Tremont Mark also missed the blowout loss at Ole Miss midweek with a migraine. So key guard and a key big, especially with Brazile being one of the lone pieces on Arkansas that can effectively attack Kentucky's lacking pick and roll defense. So it's not only do you want to back an ugly Arkansas team that struggles when they're healthy, but they may not have 2 of their integral pieces at both ends of the floor. Brazil's ability to switch and, again, attack the paint and space out these Kentucky 4 and 5s, especially because they do kind of lack with their foot speed. So, yeah, I'm not running to the window to back Arkansas. I'm interested to see how if Kentucky bounces back from that South Carolina loss, if Arkansas is fully healthy, considering this is kind of their Super Bowl hype spot at home. Conference game, you got 18 to 22-year-olds trying to knock off one of the better teams in college basketball, at least when you look at the AP Top 25. And heck, I have them in my top 15, so I'm not saying that Kentucky is bad by any stretch or close to that. But I just think Kentucky has gotten too hyped up over the last couple of weeks. You get Big Z over from Croatia, and you get people just looking at their offensive efficiency versus the full picture.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Arkansas's resume, since that, resume-worthy win against Duke back in November, I mean, what has this team done? They've beaten Furman, Lipscomb, Abilene Christian, UNC Wilmington, and a 1-point win at home against Texas A&M. That's it. Like, that's all that it's nothing. That it's been too long since that Duke game to still dwell on that. So, you know, here's the other funny part. Arkansas is only 10-8, and both Shot Quality and KenPom agree they're actually pretty lucky to be 10-8. So that's interesting too. Now, enough about Arkansas. Back to Kentucky. We do need to at least still monitor them, Eli. We're almost to February here. You and I both know that Calipari teams over the years tend to continue to get better as we get closer to March. He's not exactly an X's and O's guy, but his teams have steadily improved when they have talent in certain years and made runs to the Final Four. So we need to at least monitor to see if this defense does improve between now and Selection Sunday. And it better, because the other thing about their offense, even though they're pretty highly rated in a lot of these metrics, they're not inside the top 200 in rim and three rate with the talent they have with their outside shooting at Kentucky for the first time in a long time in Lexington, and the bigs they have on the inside. Isn't it kind of inexcusable for Kentucky not to be inside the top 200 in rim and three rate? Isn't that kind of like a little bit of coaching malpractice here?
To an extent. I mean, you look at Kentucky's 3-point attempt rate across college basketball, and it's definitely up from where it's been in the past. So just kind of looking at the last decade plus, I think you could say it's better than it has been under Calipari. And
but is it still where it should be compared to the landscape of college basketball?
Correct. In the landscape of Calipari's recent teams, or even the teams he's coached, it's better, and it's definitely improved. But right, across modern day college basketball, and also they are, like I said, they are taking their fair share of threes, but you don't have your traditional back to the basket big. You look at the last couple of years with Kentucky, you had Oscar Tshiebwe a couple of years ago winning the Wooden Award, so you had a true back to the basket big and one of the best second chance creators in the country. And then they didn't really have 3-point shooting outside of Kellen Grady when that Kentucky team was the number 2 seed 2 years ago. I had a future on Kentucky that year, and Grady had plantar fasciitis, and they were upset by St. Peter's in the first round of the NCAA tournament just because they couldn't shoot and they failed to make free throws in overtime, and upsets happen. But yeah, in the complete landscape of college basketball, if we're not looking at the way Kentucky has constructed their offense since Calipari took over in Lexington, it could be better.
Yeah, I agree. You know, looking at their team profile page on Haslametrics, they're third in the nation in 3-point percentage against the average opponent. They're only 188th in 3-point attempt rate per 100 trips down the court against the average opponent. So, again, better than a lot of Calipari teams in the past. Probably not where it should be with the talent they have and the shooters they have on the outside.